Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today for our UDA Academy free class on learning the 4 keys to successful scheduling. I'm Holly Gibson, Senior Product Specialist here at UDA Technologies.
Hi, everyone. This is Jordan Davis, also Senior Product Specialist with UDA Technologies.
And we're really so excited that you could join us. If you guys are new to UDA Technologies, we provide the leading construction project management software in the industry to over 750,000 of you all over the world. And one thing we've heard from you this last couple of weeks is that many of you guys are now working from home along with the rest of the country. So we've had a chance to talk to many of our clients and are hearing that you are working from home, but that you are working and really more than ever would like to hear from us for training and workshops. And so we've actually added some additional classes to the schedule, are working on adding some more of those in. So if there are topics out there that you guys would really love to see us cover or classes that you'd like to see us offer, please chat those over today or feel free to send me an email after the presentation. We want to continue to add these classes in so that you guys can really make the most of your time and get in as much of that training as possible.
Of course, for those of you joining us this afternoon, we are so thankful and really want to welcome you to our webinar stream today. Take a look at the GoToWebinar panel if this is the first time you're joining us. We really like to run an interactive webinar. We like to respond to audience questions and really want to know what we can do to help you learn and make the most out of ConstructionOnline or really any of our platforms. With that in mind, our colleague Sydney Dorsey is going to be flagging your questions and making sure that they're brought to our attention as we work through the webinar today. Go ahead and send us a message today. Let us know who you are, maybe where you're located in the country and what currently is happening, what we can do to help, and really what you're most interested in learning about today as we work through scheduling. And with that, let's go ahead and jump right in. We have a lot of topics to cover, even though there's only a few bullet points. Scheduling inside of ConstructionOnline is a really powerful tool. It's very robust, and while there's a lot of topics to cover today.
There definitely is. So when we were looking at putting together this session, it was hard for us to narrow it down to 4 or 5 key points, or only 4 or 5 things that you would do. So what we really tried to do is kind of focus in on what we feel like are the 4 most impactful concepts that you guys can use when you're building the schedule. Really, the first one is to look at predecessors and how those work, how the predecessor relationships work, how that impacts the critical path, and how that impacts really your ability to make schedule adjustments quickly. That's one of the number one reasons why people will come to us wanting a better scheduling system than what they have in place, is because we can offer really the opportunity to do fast updates on the schedule with very little work, or a lot less work compared to what you may be doing now. So that's really one of the first things that we wanted to touch on. We'll also be looking at things like using schedule templates and how to either get one of our templates or really build your own, because it's an easy thing to build, but as you're moving forward in scheduling, we think the use of templates is something that can really help you repeat success for every project. So you kind of set up that successful process and then set yourself up to be able to repeat that. We'll also look at using reminders and reports like our GamePlan automated report to really communicate this information out to everyone on the project team. And then also how to customize the schedule interface that you're using to really get the most out of scheduling. It's something that a lot of people maybe don't know yet that they can do, but there's some really cool options for customizing just to be able to really tailor your view to how you like to work. So I know we wanted to start really today with a schedule that I've already built in ConstructionOnline to give you guys an example and really talk through what we think a schedule should look like when you're done.
Yeah, absolutely. And really the key of this schedule that we've built today is that, one, it lists all of the major tasks from start to finish for our schedule, and 2, we've spent the time to move through the schedule and set up and define predecessor relationships throughout the entire schedule. Now, Holly mentioned just a few moments ago that really the first key to success in your schedules is taking advantage of the predecessor system. Well, today our main goal for the first key to success here is to simplify and really make it easy to understand, one, what a predecessor is, two, how it works, and then three, how to actually apply it to your own schedules. The predecessor system really is, I think, the main reason why you would want to use a Gantt chart scheduling system in the first place, besides, of course, the visual presentation of the dates.
Yeah, the visualization is wonderful. And one thing you'll notice on our screen here, so all I've done, again, for anyone that might be a little newer to Construction Online, all I've really done here is selected my project and I've gone into my calendar and schedule section here, and then I've chosen my scheduling. So this is where the Gantt chart schedule for this project lives. Now, a couple of common questions that people will usually ask at this point, especially when you kind of just look at what am I looking at here. So we have the schedule task list as well as the Gantt chart view here. So we have that information displayed. We also have a wonderful dashboard here at the top that shows us a bit of a higher level view of our schedule's progress. So we can see quickly, just on an abbreviated timeline, how far into the schedule we are, any upcoming milestones, what our projected end date will be, and then really how many tasks have been marked as complete here, how many work days we've gone through. So big snapshot of the schedule progress here, and then that visualization on the Gantt chart. Now, for those of you that want to present this in a more calendar type layout, one of the great things too about Construction Online scheduling is that once you've got this built, it is going to show on your project calendar as well. So you'll be able to see all of these same tasks just come onto more of a regular calendar layout view as well. Now, if we go back and start looking at this schedule, one thing is, as we kind of look at these different elements, they are so wonderful, but they do take up a little bit of screen space. So we've actually built a nice full screen mode that you can go into when you're working on your schedules. And that'll give us a chance to open up and really see some additional information here, like those predecessors, Jordan, that you were talking about, and some other key information here.
And that's exactly right. Now, as we're looking through the schedule, since we're really focusing in on, how to set up and build out the predecessors, we thought today we would show an example of a finished schedule, something that we're proud of and we're using as a template internally. We're going to transfer over in a minute to a blank schedule and actually work through building out a new schedule template. This is often a very common task that new users of Construction Online will start doing, and it's actually pretty straightforward. But first, let's dive in and talk a little bit about the predecessor relationships and really what they mean and what they do, because we've touched on it briefly. But unless you've used a Gantt chart system before, it's a bit of a confusing term. Maybe confusing isn't the right word.
Well, sometimes it's just new. So for those of you out there who are pretty familiar with Gantt charts and using a system with predecessors, it'll be really like second nature. But if you've not worked with a system like this before, you may be wondering, what it is that creates that relationship, or how do we get it so that we can shift that entire schedule at once. And so effectively what a predecessor is, and you'll notice it represented in this column here, is it's really just a place where we can say which task we are creating a relationship. So we're saying, in this case, that the task that's located on line 2 needs to be completed before we can begin work on the task here on this line. So I'm just really saying I want my site work to be finished before footers material can begin. And those relationships are represented on the Gantt chart by these lines and arrows, so you can see how certain tasks are connected to each other. And that just lets me know that those are connected with those predecessor relationships. And if I, for example, move this task over by a few days, the tasks behind it are going to go ahead and shift as well, so that I'm not having to make manual updates to every other item on the schedule, but rather I can really just shift in one or two places and have all related tasks go ahead and shift with it.
Yeah, and that's really the key to predecessors, is that they automate a lot of the downstream or cascading tasks that happen after the task in question is moved, right? So we can see, we start to see a chain of events happening here where if task number 2 is updated, well, we see that task number 3 is looking at task number 2 to find out when it should start, right? If we look at task number 4, well, the same is true for it. It's looking back to or dependent on task number 3. And really this starts to build a very powerful system in the schedule itself that can keep everything up to date down the line or at later parts of the schedule, simply by updating our earlier tasks and saying, well, it turns out that we had a couple of rain delay days, and it turns out we're behind by about a day. Well, that updates the rest of the schedule in series without having to go through and update every single event on the schedule. Now, when it comes to reading predecessor events, again, they're pretty straightforward. As Holly mentioned, the first element is really tracking for the number here, the row of the task that it is going to follow. But then there's these 2 letters. There's, at least in our system, there's only 2 relationship types or 2 letters that you would use to set up a predecessor. The first is the letter F, that stands for finish. And the second is the letter S, and that stands for start. These 2 letters are used in different combinations to really set up the type of predecessor relationship, but really the default and the simplest is the finish start relationship. And I usually recommend reading predecessors like this. When task number 2 is finished, then this task starts. And if you kind of keep that rhythm or you keep that pattern in mind, you can start to read the rest of our relationships as we move through here. For instance, task number 4's predecessor is telling us, well, when task 3 starts, this task also starts. It starts to become really simple to see, how the rest of the schedule is going to update just by looking at the predecessor relationships here in this column. And then you can use this information to start building out your own schedules moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Now, in addition to the different types of predecessor relationships that you can have, and this is such a great example, we can see how these 2 tasks are always going to start on the same date. That's what we need to happen. We need to make sure that that they're starting together. Now, sometimes we need to make sure that we build in a little bit of additional time, either outside of the range of that predecessor or somewhat within it. So you have your lead time and lag time that can also be applied. So there's an example of that here. So in addition to assigning the different predecessor types, we can also go ahead and say, in this case, I've added a +3, which just means really that I need for this task to start, my slab inspection, it needs to start in relationship to the task on line number 10. So we're going to say it can begin when task number 10 here, our concrete slab labor, is finished. This one can start 3 days after that. So that +3 is telling me really, okay, so here's the predecessor relationship. Now add 3 days to it. So I always want this one to start 3 days later. You can also do the same thing with a minus. So if we needed to build in a couple of days, what we'd call lead time there. And that's pretty common for things like material ordering, where you might want to go ahead and just say, well, okay, we want this task to start when this one only has 2 days remaining in it. So especially if you've got a longer task or something that you're trying to set up that way. Here's what that would look like. So if we want to say that this one is going to go with maybe 13, what we'll say minus 3 days. You'll notice that it's basically going to build in, it's indented 3 days in up under this task, and that relationship will again stay as we continue to make those adjustments.
Yeah, and this makes a lot of sense for things like Holly was mentioning in terms of maybe material delivery dates. Perhaps you wanted to set up different materials to be delivered at different stages of a major task. Like you can see where this first task here is really set up and intended to be all the framing work for this project. Well, maybe we want to stage the roof materials arriving maybe halfway or maybe just a little past the start date, but we really need the rest of the framing package to arrive at the beginning of the task so people can get to work. So you can really use this to stage out different events in series for a major task or really a major phase in a schedule. Likewise with the lag time here for the slab inspection, maybe we want to add in a few days for the actual foundation to set or cure. This makes a lot of sense. In fact, I was working with a company who's doing a lot of rapid iteration for different sites where they're doing multiple pours in series, and they were doing exactly this. They were adding in maybe 3 or 4 days, depending on the size of the slab, to make sure that it had enough time to actually set before they had somebody come out and inspect. And some pretty common sense things, but really that's the key of scheduling is making sure that you're building your schedules with common sense built into them.
Well, exactly. And you have just a ton of flexibility to get that, to get that done and create those relationships. And that kind of goes back to creating that first pass where you go through, and then once you've decided, that can then be templated out if those relationships will always exist in more or less the same way. As we see often, we know that the concrete slab is always going to need a little bit of time to cure, so that makes sense that you would have that. Now, we did have a great question coming in about just what relationship would materials have on the schedule. So, on my schedule, there are a good number of items that are just labeled as material items. So you might have labor items, material items. You can choose to break out your labor a little bit differently here. But yeah, that can definitely either indicate ordering dates or delivery dates. You could also put lines on there that indicated both. So if you wanted to do a task that was, that indicated ordering and expected delivery, you could do that. So it's really completely up to you and what you think needs to happen on your schedule there.
Yeah, that's actually really common for me, at least, to see clients setting up almost an order task list at the very top of their schedule as part of maybe their pre-construction setup, or really just after they have started working on the project. They want to make sure that they are ordering materials in time to actually begin the project at the scheduled start date. So I'll typically see a section at the very top of the schedule here titled something like material order dates or orders, something like that. And they'll have the different items listed out in series here just to make sure that that's staying top of mind and really staying present in the schedule. And once they've actually made their way through completing all of the different orders, they'll actually just collapse this section here for reference later on. And then they'll use the predecessor relationships throughout the schedule to really tie together the order dates to the delivery dates to the actual start of different tasks throughout. This is not, and I don't want to use the word advanced because it's really not that difficult to set up, but typically I'll see clients who have a bit more experience working with Gantt charts start to move towards that setup when they're working through their schedules. Feel free, if you're not doing this, to go ahead and steal this idea and implement this in your own schedules.
Yeah. Now, the last thing about predecessors, and great question coming in from a client here about that, is really just to look at a line that has multiple predecessors. So we had a great question coming in just to kind of touch on that. And one thing that is great here is that ConstructionOnline is flexible enough to allow you to have, you can definitely have, each line could have one predecessor, could have two, could have three, could have even more than that. Sometimes we may see that some sort of inspection, in this case, is dependent on having several items completed before we want that to happen. And so in that case, we would want to tie it together. And so you'll notice that's going to be represented by multiple lines here. So we have, and this is actually a milestone task, so that's indicated by this green diamond here. Now, to set a task as a milestone, I'm just going to double click here, and there's a checkbox that we can use that will say, okay, this is going to be a milestone. So giving it that designation is what gives it that symbol. And so that is typically used for things like, I see milestones used most commonly for inspection days, for things like payments. Payment due dates will sometimes be represented by a milestone depending on the type of project. And so in this case, I'm saying, well, the task on line 5, 6, and 7, I want this inspection to be dependent on all three of those. And so that's going to be represented by these lines. So you can see each of these tasks has a little arrow and a line coming out, and they all lead to the foundation inspection here on line number 8. So if to set that up, the only thing that you have to do really is just type in each predecessor separated by a comma. So we'll assign this one to line 13, 14, and 15. Hit enter, and now that relationship is going to be established with all three of those. Now, you set up a lot of predecessors like this, you'll notice like on my schedule that starts to be, a lot of lines, but if you just trace them back, they're all gonna follow that relationship, how you've set up, which really kind of leads us to the next thing before we look at maybe building a blank schedule, if we're sort of looking at, okay, having a schedule put together and how all the parts should be working, one thing that comes up a lot as well is this concept or idea of the critical path. So that's something that you can turn on and off in terms of visual representation in ConstructionOnline. So that is something that's going to be located here under your view menu. It's just a toggle, so we'll go ahead and say show critical path, and you'll notice now that some of my tasks have turned red. Now some have not, so we'll take a look really at what the critical path means if we follow these red lines. Really, a critical path, what that's doing is working its way almost backwards from the end of our schedule. So it will highlight in red any task that has a direct impact on the end date of the project or of the schedule. So some things that are typically not connected with predecessors to the end may not really have bearing directly on where we finish, the end date, of the schedule there. It's important that all things are done on time, but for some items, you have a little bit of wiggle room. If it happens a day or two later, it doesn't really, in the end, impact the last day, the finish date of your schedule, whereas there are many items throughout your schedule that are going to be more critical. A delay here for something that's on your critical path is usually going to translate into a net delay for the end date of your project.
Yeah, and that's really the key to using a critical path. It really does tell you, well, which items in our schedule are critical, which items can't be delayed, or if there is going to be a delay impacting those items, what can we do to try and recoup or try to catch back up to our initial schedule projection, right? I don't think that I've worked with a client who has ever run 100% perfectly on-time jobs in their entire career. There's always going to be delays, right? The critical path, however, gives you an idea, at least from your original plan for the project, of which tasks truly are critical and should be treated as such, right? So this is really going to give you a great snapshot or a really, really quick way of finding out, okay, well, if this task is pushed out, let's say you get a call from your insulation supplier and they say, well, either A, we don't have insulation because supply lines are backed up right now, or B, our delivery trucks broke down, or C, we're just not going to go to any job sites right now, right? Well, you could quickly find out, okay, well, is this really going to push us back? I mean, probably, but you might be able to buy yourself some time. Unfortunately, it looks like with the way we have our schedule set up now, however, that if our insulation task was delayed, even by 1 day, that's going to push the end date of our schedule back by 1 day. That's really what this is signaling to you. And to note again, critical path schedule is entirely dependent on it. It's really tracking through predecessors throughout the schedule. So, with that in mind, you'll want to make sure that when you're building your schedule, that you think about plotting through, if you want to use the critical path, that is, a predecessor relationship chain that extends from the beginning of the schedule all the way to the end of the schedule. Now that might sound like a lot of work, but we've added some tools and shortcuts into our scheduling system that makes that really simple and really easy to do. Mm-hmm. Even if you were starting from scratch, from not a schedule template, we've actually made it pretty simple to start setting up a chain from start to finish.
Well, yeah, so what we're working with here is a schedule that we've created using a schedule template. So in that case, I've created that, and a lot of this work has been done for me. That's something that Jordan and I talk about a lot, is really encouraging you guys to use templates where possible, and it certainly makes it really fast and easy to create a schedule with a lot of detail. We did want to we'll come out of this and maybe jump into another project that doesn't yet have a schedule to look at, okay, so what if you need to go ahead and create a new schedule? So let's say that there's not a template within ConstructionOnline already that you want to use. What does the process look like for going ahead and creating that? So to look at that, we'll just jump over to a different project. So my Summit job right here doesn't have a project yet, and you'll notice that we actually have a few options for getting that created. So the first one, of course, is to create from a template. And in the end, once you have some templates in the system, here's what that's going to look like. You'll choose which template you want to use. give the schedule a name, choose which elements you want to include there, so you do have some flexibility, and then go ahead and just save that. You'll have a new schedule populated in no time. You can also import schedules from a couple of different places. You can actually import schedules for any of you who might be users of our desktop product, ConstructionSuite. Those schedules can be imported and brought up to ConstructionOnline, so that's a really easy way to get a schedule in the system. If you're using an outside program or someone sent you an outside program like a MS project file, or maybe you have an old schedule you want to pull in, you can definitely do that. Or of course you can go ahead and create a blank schedule. So we'll be taking a look at what it looks like to really work with a blank schedule from scratch.
Fairly similar, except that you'll notice there's not really anything either in the list view or in the Gantt chart view, as you would probably expect from a blank schedule from scratch, right? This isn't very groundbreaking. What I do like to mention, though, and what is groundbreaking, is really the speed at which you can start assembling or building out a new schedule. Now, when I'm working with companies and they're really starting and they don't have any template materials from scratch, they don't really have anything to reference, right? It's one of the more common questions that I'll get is, well, where do we start? How do we start building a schedule? The great thing about our scheduling system is that, well, the companies already have every piece of information they need to build their schedules. And that's because it really starts, at least when I recommend building a schedule, with the tasks themselves. The first step is to ignore the start date and the end dates, to ignore the predecessors, the predecessor relationships, and really start by building out everything that needs to happen in your project from start to finish. And that really begins by entering in different tasks. If we're thinking back to our previous project, well, we were going to start at this point in time. Let's actually start with materials, right? Material orders. Simple enough. Then we move on to, let's say, site work. We have foundation items here, and then we need to set up some, then we need to move into framing. And then maybe from there we're going to move into really whatever your next step would be for your schedule. That's perfectly fine. But I want to point out something's happening here inside of our schedule that's going to save us a lot of time in the long run. And that is we're starting to see these lines appearing in the schedule, predecessor relationships. How is that happening? These are appearing automatically. That's interesting. Well, this is a setting that we have designed to really speed up the process of building a new schedule from scratch. You can actually find this inside of the schedule view options menu. We've enabled automatic predecessors. Now, remember a few minutes ago we were talking about building out the critical path for a schedule and making sure that your schedule from start to finish followed one consistent predecessor relationship chain from start to finish. Well, if you start by building out the critical path of your schedule with this option enabled, well, you automatically have built out your critical path for the schedule. No need to go through and set up the relationships one by one by one. This can save you a lot of time, and then it can allow you to go back and revise the schedule and add in different elements or different items to the schedule that, while they're important, might not actually impact the end date of the schedule itself. Things like additional items that you could add in that really don't push the end of the schedule out, but just need to be done as part of the project moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you'll see, I mean, it's so fast to get those added in. The predecessor relationship here, you'll notice, is already established. So not only are the lines there, but you can see that that predecessor column is populating for you automatically. So there's nothing, you don't have to type it in or anything like that. Now you can go back and adjust the different predecessor relationship types, or maybe add in a little lead time or lag time or something like that. But really it's just as simple as typing, and that starts to be built out for us. Now, a couple of other things that you'll notice on the schedule here as we're building it, you can choose to group these together. So I'm making right here a pretty flat list of just items in sequence. But if we did want to create things like groups, the way that my schedule a moment ago was grouped, you can actually come in and insert those. So you'll notice in my toolbar here, I have the option to insert a new task. I can insert a group, which is going to create just that, one of those groupings for me. So that's pretty easy to do. And then here, once I've established my my group, and I don't, What should this be, Jordan?
Well, I
So
was kind of
let's
moving
see.
towards material orders for the first group at the very top there. So,
Oh, well, so it looks like we'll go ahead and I'm just going to say material orders. Now, a couple of things I could do here since I've, made a little mistake, but this is good for you guys to see because you're gonna want to tweak your schedule, right? So what I could do here is come up and take this and move it up. So if I want to use my toolbar, I can really quickly just move this group right up to the top if I wanted to do that. Or maybe if I realized, okay, I shouldn't have made that, I could come in instead and basically convert this into a group. So I could convert the one I'd already done into a group and maybe just get rid of this one. Now, kind of as you work your way through the schedule, a couple of things that are helpful to note. You have this toolbar, so you can turn that on or off just using the toggle here at the top. I enjoy using it. It's a great way to get things done quickly. It can be a really great way of adding in a bunch of tasks in succession and coming back and filling those out. And also there are right-click menus throughout, so if you need to do things like edit the task or move it up or down, you can usually do that by the right-click menu option. Now, for those of you that maybe have been using ConstructionOnline scheduling for a while, you're probably noticing a new option here where you can set the task color. So in addition to that color coding that you'll see with the critical path where it automatically turns red, if you did want to do a little bit of color coding on your schedule, you can do that here. And those are really the next few things that you would probably start to do after you've outlined your schedule from a task perspective. We're usually going to want to come in and start doing things like assigning resources, or maybe adding in some additional notes or descriptive items for people that are going to be doing the work.
Yeah, and there's a couple of different options for that as well. The first option, of course, is setting categorical items, things like what type of task is this? What trade would actually be performing this task, right? If it's internal work, maybe you don't actually set a trade, but if it's external work, you do. Now, the reason why you'd want to go ahead and set this information is both for quick reference inside of the schedule itself. We'll talk about some ways to see this information in detail, but also later on you'll be able to pull out specific tasks or specific items from the schedule based on different pieces of information you're putting into the schedule now. There's also an area inside of the schedule here for notes, not so much the description, but the notes field, which is useful for those of you who might be referring to the schedule or checking the schedule in an agenda view on the mobile app as well. This section is great for not only giving people quick updates on different tasks, but also for it gives you a space in the mobile app to actually post notes back to the schedule as well.
So you notice that as I've gone through a couple of things to kind of help make some of that easier. So as we were going through, you'll notice that anywhere you have this symbol that just means the little gear, means that you can customize something. So for things like your trades or task types or statuses, those are things that you can customize. Resources are super easy to add in. This is where we would do reminders, so we'll dive into those in just a moment as well, and then the notes. Now, in terms of what you can do with some of this, there are some great options here for you as well. So we've been looking at and focusing a good bit on creating a Gantt chart. So that's what I've done here. And it's great. You can see how easy it is to maybe adjust dates or durations on some of these tasks. I mean, it's really, everything is just point and click, drag and drop. So it makes it really fast to get this done. Once you have the schedule done, though, it can be nice to use this list view option as well. That is really going to give you
It is going to give you a list of information, but I think we're going to have to jump into discussing our next topic, which is really customizing the view or the data that we're looking at for the schedule itself. Now, I've worked with a lot of different types of clients, Holly, and what I found is that there's almost two camps of schedule users. There's those who use the Gantt chart and love the Gantt chart and really dig into making the most of the visual display of the chart itself. There are also those clients who work primarily in a list view for the schedule, where they go through and they build out and they itemize their schedules. They set their starts and end dates using things like keyboard shortcuts because they don't really want to fiddle with the mouse. It's just what they're used to. And that's really what the list view for the schedule was designed for that person who really likes working in the spreadsheet or the chart view to really build out and flesh out their schedules and then let everyone else deal with the graphical representation on the other side.
Well, it can be really great as well for things like updates, because here I can quickly see not only which task maybe I need to mark as complete. So if I'm a project manager coming in and wanting to keep my schedule up to date, I want to be able to indicate things like completion, but it's also a really fast way for me to indicate flag high priority items, for example, or set a status if something is paused or perhaps waiting. So you've got, again, these that you can customize. I can also quickly see that I don't have any reminders set up, so it's a nice visual representation of, okay, do I have resources assigned here? Do I have reminders that have been set up? And if not, well, maybe I need to go in and do that. So it's a great way to do it. You can also see if there are notes assigned to the task here in this view. And you can use a different type of color coding, which is your stoplight section. That just allows you to assign a really quick red, yellow, or green to the task. And a lot of teams use this as a really nice shorthand way to indicate, okay, we all know that red tasks mean
they're waiting for
they're
a review.
waiting, or we're paused for some reason, or green is good, we're all go. So just an easy way to color code some of that. So our list view is a really wonderful way to be able to see a lot of the information that you would normally just see when you had the task open here, and really more of a chart-like layout.
That's right. And I'm going to go ahead and address this right now because this question comes up all the time. Questions like, well, what's the difference between paused and waiting? Or what do the stoplights mean, right? Well, the answer here is it means whatever it needs to mean for you and your team. Really, there's not a great one-size-fits-all answer for this, but that's not a bad thing at all. In fact, that's the advantage of using a system to coordinate your schedules together like this, is that you and your team can define the most effective meanings for these different items. And then review and apply those meanings as you work through the schedule together. Now, I've also had questions come up for things like, well, why would we use the stoplight and the status bar together, right? Why wouldn't we use one or the other? Well, the short answer here is, well, you don't really have to use both. You can pick one or the other, or use both together. But think about the efficiency and the effectiveness of the stoplight when you're working in the Gantt chart view versus the efficiency and the effectiveness of the status bars or the status settings when you're working in the list view, right? They appear differently. It's a lot easier to shrink and look at the Gantt chart and check the stoplights. There's a lot of advantages that you can really use, just depending on which view you're in and what your team prefers to use.
Yeah, and I see people sometimes use the stoplight to represent, I mean, I've seen it used in so many creative ways, but a couple of common ways would be back to those material deliveries, just a green to indicate successful delivery or reception of products, or a red to indicate that there's a problem there. I also see it used probably most commonly with maybe a handoff between a project management and accounting team, whereas a green might indicate that it's been billed or that it's ready for billing. So there's really no limit. You can make this your own, and as you get more comfortable kind of going in and updating the schedules and working with them, you'll find a lot of great uses for tools like that. Now, we looked at the list view. Another option for you to look at here really is, what if you like the Gantt view and want to kind of get rid of some of what's in your list view here. You can definitely slide that over to where you're just looking at those task names. And if you do that, some of the other view options are really nice as well, because you can actually show the task names right on the Gantt chart. And you can also choose to show the dates here, which I find particularly helpful. Just to get that visual, especially when you're looking at a chart, sometimes it's really nice to be able to see, okay, this is April 7th through 10th. Here's what that looks like.
Yeah, this is helpful, especially for those who might have larger screens who don't want to look up to the top of the schedule to see what day the task is starting and ending. And the same is true for the task names as well. It's a lot easier to just look directly at the Gantt chart and see the names as opposed to looking back to the left and then looking back to the right. Again, the view options might change depending on the screen that you're working on or what you prefer. But to access these options, all you need to do is open the toolbar and look in the schedule view options to find those.
Now, also within the schedule view options, as we look at a couple of more options just for customization for you, because, that's one of the things that we really encourage people to do is like get in there, use it, and take advantage of the fact that you can, different people in different roles might really have a need to see different pieces of information a little bit more front and center, and that's really why we built these options. So we've looked at some of those just to kind of recap. You have the task names that you can show here. You also have your show and hide columns, which allows you to customize the columns that are shown in both your Gantt view and your list view. So I had a good many turned off in my list view. I've turned those back on now. I still have some that I'm not showing on my Gantt view, but I could turn those on here if I wanted to as well, and those will be now located here and available for me to access. You can switch back and forth between the two views really quickly and easily here. And you also have some additional customization options within your tools menu to allow you to customize not so much a view, but the way the schedule behaves when you're setting up workdays. So you'll notice on my Gantt chart that Saturday and Sunday here tend to be shaded, so I can see that those are shaded. It also highlights today for me, but I can set up custom holidays or non-work days, so we can kind of declare for this schedule we are going to run a standard Monday through Friday work week. We may want to instead say that we'll be working on Saturdays really for the duration of this job, so that would be fine as well. So you can really customize and turn those on. We do load in a set of holidays for you here. So for US holidays, you can again kind of choose what you want to be observed. For any of our international customers who are joining us today, maybe from all over, I know frequently we'll have especially for this time, we'll very often have people coming in joining from places like Australia or different parts of Asia. And so we do have holidays built in really to try and cover every country for you. But if that's not enough or doesn't quite have you covered, you can come into your custom holidays here to add in a custom non-work day is effectively what we're doing. Maybe your company celebrates a Founder's Day or something like that. You can put that in here, or maybe you just need to build in a regional holiday or something to account for in your schedule. So you would just choose your date, add that in, and that's it. That'll now highlight on our Gantt chart, and we'll take that date into account as a non-work day when calculating things like durations and those predecessor relationships for you. So that's a lot of options for you. We'll go back to look at our dashboard as well just for a moment and really look at a couple of the tools that are available for you in your dashboard. So we kind of looked at our start to finish. So this is going to create a timeline for us with the start date, the end date, and any of those milestones that we assign will be in the middle. So if we assign, we'll just make framing a milestone. You'll notice that now appears here. So it's just a way to get a great visual. You can see that I've completed 2 of my 5 tasks. So your dashboard's going to update here. And then we've had 1 out of our 13 scheduled work days to elapse so far. So this is a great quick comparison to be able to see how many work days have elapsed, how far into it from a time perspective are you, and then compare that with how far along you are from a actual task completed standpoint. Now you also have the baseline tool here. Jordan, I know that you're a huge proponent of setting and measuring baselines. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And to cover baselines, I'm actually going to switch back over to the schedule we built out because it's going to give us a lot more rich information and things that are really going to help us understand not just how we projected the schedule to go or how we wanted it or wished it to perform, but really how we are actually performing or executing against our projections, right? So for those of you who aren't familiar with baselines, a baseline, at least inside of ConstructionOnline, is going to be a snapshot of the schedule. It's going to take a frozen picture in time of every single task's start date, end date, and duration for us. Now, you might be wondering, okay, that's interesting. Why would you do that? Well, the main benefit of this is that we can then use that snapshot to compare where we thought we were going to be in our schedule to where we actually are today. Taking into account any delays, or in some cases, how far ahead of schedule we are, in the hopeful world of things, right?
Well, and it's something that we're seeing a lot of people dealing with right now. I know many of you out there now have projects that are delayed. Maybe things in your area have been maybe they're under some sort of mandatory delay. What's nice is to be able to look back a year from now and have a report that measures the exact impact maybe of those closures. So if your job is delayed right now, you set a baseline. Make sure that you tag that the baseline is related to COVID-19 and save that or some of those mandatory closures. It's nice to be able to look back and say, okay, this actually delayed us by X number of work days and see the impact of that, on your schedule. There's all sorts of delays that can come up, but we're definitely, seeing a lot of you dealing with delays right now, and this is a great way to be able to measure that.
Yeah, absolutely. And give me just a moment and we'll actually be able to show you what's going on here. Now, I'm actually going to shift around a couple of different pieces of information here. Specifically, I wanted to add in my own task tracking for the delay because it might be extended. And I wanted to keep track of the delay specifically inside of my schedule. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove the predecessor relationship and say, well, the mandate started, I don't know, it started today. It didn't actually start today for us, but for some of our clients it did. And let's say that's going to kick into the end of April. So we're now tracking our delay inside of our schedule. None of the other tasks really are keying off of this task just yet, but they will in just a moment. So now we can start to see, well, most of the tasks inside of our schedule have now been pushed far into the future. We're tracking things like, well, now our photos, materials, and labor, everything is now kicked ahead pretty much 1 month. So if we start to work through our baseline now, what we're going to start seeing is that, well, everything that we projected at least is going to be moved ahead by some considerable amount of time, roughly 1 month. And we're going to start seeing that both on an individual group level basis inside of our baseline and also inside of the schedule itself, although it looks like I might have completely thrown our baseline off by adding in this new task. So let's do this. We're going to add in a new baseline. So this is going to be our COVID-19 delay, which I actually do recommend. So now, the last time we were talking about baselines in schedules, we were in hurricane season.
That's right.
And a couple of our clients actually had been impacted by hurricanes that year. And we'd actually recommended creating a pre-hurricane baseline and a post-hurricane baseline to keep track of things like, well, here's where we thought we were going to be instead of our baseline, and well, now we're actually delayed by, 4 or 5 different days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, there's all sorts of great use cases. We actually just recommend that an easy way to do it is just to set a baseline at the beginning of every project. I mean, that's kind of the easiest way to use the tool is just to set the baseline at the beginning of the job. That way, any changes that you make, you can always go back and really look at those.
Yeah, but this only answers the question of, well, how are we doing right now and what can we aim to fix as we're moving ahead? Something I also like to recommend for schedules is also running something like a baseline report at the end of the schedule to keep track of, well, what changed in our schedule and was it something that we could control? This question comes up pretty often, Holly, in different training sessions or meetings I'll have one-on-one with companies for schedules, which is, well, Okay, so what could we have done better for our schedules, or how could we improve on our project management tasks? Well, what I usually like to recommend is running a baseline schedule or a baseline report for your schedule that is going to pull together, where did you project you were going to start and finish for your schedule, and where did you land on that schedule?
I think with this one, since the baseline hasn't actually
Updated?
affected anything yet, but if you go to, I think, Hamilton there, you'll see. Now this one is pretty significantly behind, so my baseline was 93 work days, so I am pretty close to doubling what I initially projected. But you can see the nice visualization of, okay, here's where I thought I was going to be. Here's what I thought this schedule would look like. Here is what it actually looks like as of right now. And then any of the reports that we generate would reflect that. Now you can set multiple baselines. So I know we've seen that limitation in other programs where you can only set one, but we actually allow you to set as many baselines as you want to compare those with, with each other or with different places throughout the schedule. You'll also notice that you can compare this for the entire schedule or only look at impact for certain sections, which is nice as well. And it's another nice use for groups because we're able to kind of drill in and see only how framing maybe was affected or only how our HVAC was affected. So you can really kind of get in there and be able to see, some impact on that level as well.
Yeah, and this is another key element for why you would want to set up groups inside your schedule in the first place. Otherwise, you would just be looking at, we thought we were going to be here and we were 175 workdays behind. It doesn't really give you the insight into the different tasks or the different major phases for your schedule.
Now, as we get close to the top of the hour, and scheduling is such a great sort of rich topic to cover because there's so much to look at here. A couple of things though that we do want to touch on, and Jordan, you showed the baseline report or the the option to do a baseline report here, so that's definitely something you can do, and we'll actually just run one of those real quick. But you also have the option to do some additional reports. One of you earlier, I believe, asked maybe about some sort of conflict or overlap management, and so there is a conflict report that you can run and look at that either by person or by schedule, which is really nice because you can check for conflicts within a given schedule, or you can also check for conflicts for a specific contact and kind of see how that overlaps. There's also a report you can run to just do a wonderful print up of any of those notes that you've maybe entered. So if you need to print those off and hand those to somebody, a milestone report. This completion report is probably one of my favorites because if you're looking at big picture company management, especially for any of you guys who are running multiple projects side by side, it gives you a chance to say, show me a list of all of my projects that have been completed within a certain date range. So if we go back, I'll pull a pretty long date range here. And it'll just really list those off and show you a start date and end date on more of a project level or schedule level. So we can really look at, okay, which jobs we have, where did they start and end, what was the duration on them. So it's a really great tool to go back and look at, especially maybe at the end of the year, something like that for your company. So a lot of great reports within the scheduling as well. Now, probably one of my favorite reports, or one that I really encourage people to use, like anyone that I work with who is using scheduling, we really almost always look at that game plan report. I know game plan includes more than just schedules, Jordan, but it does. The two kind of go hand in hand usually for the type of communication I see my clients wanting to do.
Absolutely. And really, when it comes to game plans, this tool for me answers the question, okay, well, how do I keep people up to date for the tasks they need to be working on for the different schedules they're responsible for? Or how do I let people know how the schedule is changing over time without completely, exploding their inbox with hundreds and hundreds of updates as we move one task, right? We found a really, really great way of keeping everyone involved with a project, or projects plural, up to date using the automated game plan report. This is a report which serves as a digest or a task list for everything that a person is assigned to throughout ConstructionOnline. And really the best part about GamePlans is that you set this up once, and then the system continues to deliver reminders and updates to that person from that point on. So as you're working through a new schedule and you're assigning a different resource or assigning a different subcontractor or someone in your company to different tasks, their game plan will continue to pull that information in and send them daily updates or maybe weekly updates. Really, the settings of the game plan are very customizable, which gives it a lot of flexibility. Now, there's two typical game plans I'll recommend setting up. The first one that Holly's building now is it's kind of like a snapshot game plan for someone who's responsible for a schedule or a project or multiple projects. This is almost like the project manager game plan, if you think about it. This game plan is going to send out every day, and it's going to include a rolling task list of all of the tasks for me that I can see, not just the ones I'm assigned to, but for all of my projects. So I can really keep up, kind of on a rolling weekly perspective, what's coming up on my plate, what's coming up for my projects. And that's going to send out to me early in the morning, early enough that it's probably going to beat most of the emails that have been sent my way trying to get my attention. That way I can start my day off right and really understand what's coming next for me. Now, another type of game plan I like to recommend is setting up a focused game plan for someone who maybe is either focused on one or two projects, either in your company or maybe a subcontractor or a trade partner, someone like that. And this is a game plan that is going to include less tasks overall. It's only going to show tasks that this person is assigned to or explicitly associated with. And maybe we even want to cut the time frame down a little bit to show them what they are working on today, or maybe what they're working on today and what they have coming up for tomorrow as well.
Yeah, I've worked with a couple of clients. I get to work with a lot of you, especially in the beginning when you're really kind of looking for, the best solution and the best combination of things to use. And so, it's not unusual for me to hear stories of like, well, how are people doing it now? So I'll talk to people who think, well, okay, I've kind of got a system in place, but I am going back to the office, or in some cases even at home, and spending a couple of hours in the evening just putting together list of things for people to do, kind of dividing it up by resource so that those can be handed out. That is a lot of manual work. So the reporting will help with that. The game plan does it for you automatically. One thing I like here is that you can have an email copy sent to you as well. So if I'm sending this to Jordan, I'm going to have him receive an email every day. It's going to say, hey, Jordan, here's your game plan for today. It's going to give him a list of everything he's supposed to get done. It's going to send a copy to my inbox as well, so I know that it got sent. I can see exactly what was on it, and we're really on the same page. It's a great solution too for kind of your team members who are using ConstructionOnline, but maybe need a little nudge to look at their schedule. It's also a great solution for team members that you're assigning as resources on your schedule, but maybe they're not really logging in. You don't need them to log in and do anything. You just need to be able to communicate this information to them. So this is a really great way to do that. Now, if we go back to our schedule here, so we'll just jump back over to our lowest project and head into our schedule. We also did touch a little bit earlier on reminders, and that is something that can be done on an individual task basis as well. So whereas the game plan will take any task assigned to that person and put it together on a report and send it to them, the reminders are done more on an individual task basis. So you can think about it like a traditional reminder that you might just set on your phone. So we're going to say for this site work task, maybe we want to create a couple of different reminders. Now, what we offer here is a kind of a standard planning reminder that we would default to 10 days out, but you can customize that here if you want. And what this is doing is kind of giving the person assigned a longer range reminder, sort of a heads up. This task is coming up in the next week or two. Here's what that looks like. It gives them a chance to just get that back on their radar and be reminded that they're assigned to do it. As with the game plan, you can send a copy to your own email as well, and you can type in what you want that reminder to say. So if you need to communicate specific information or ask them to confirm something with you, this would be the place to do that.
If you don't type anything, it is still going to send a reminder. It's just going to tell the person boilerplate information, like the project, when and where it is, and that you sent this reminder to them.
Now, we may want to also send another reminder, say 2 or 3 days out, that says, as a reminder, this task is starting in 2 days. You can also do custom reminders to send out really any time frame you choose. Again, this is all customizable, but you do have the ability to set 3 different reminders for each task. So you are covered on that reminder front as well, and it's going to do a great job. Depending on the resource that's assigned, these can go out as either text or email. So you've got the ability to get that out the door.
Yeah, and the real key to these reminders is that they're related or they're relative to the actual start date of the task, right? That's I think a key point here. Something that you might have noticed is that when you're creating a schedule from a template, you have the option to include the reminders that you might have set up on your schedule template. It's a huge recommendation I make. If there are key events inside of your schedule, let's say draw dates or invoicing or billing dates, or let's say there's certain key elements inside of your schedule that you absolutely want to make sure someone's reminded about, you can go ahead and set the reminders up in the schedule template ahead of time. And then when you're copying the schedule into a new project, well, you don't have to do that work of going through and setting up those reminders over and over again. You can really save a ton of time there and make sure that the right people are notified at the right time for every single one of your projects moving forward.
Now, we do have, we're a few minutes over, but we have a couple of great questions that I want to make sure that we answer. These are questions that Sydney's done such a lovely job of answering for us, but also I feel like would benefit the rest of you guys just to hear the questions and answers. The first one is a super simple one. So we kind of talked about the option of creating the schedule in the beginning and how to build out your own schedule. So one thing we do want to not forget to show you is, okay, well, if I build this out, how do I turn this into a template? So that's going to be one of your options here. Is you'll come to the schedule that you're using. You'll go ahead and click your action menu here and just choose Save as Template. And it will ask you what do you want to include in that template. So in this case, I want to include really my predecessor relationships, my assigned resources, and holidays. I don't want to include my percent complete because I'm going to use the template on new jobs, so none of them will be complete, but there may be situations where that makes sense, and so you've got the flexibility to kind of include what you would like or not like to include in the template. You'll just select Save, and that will drop that into your template section, so the next time you make a new schedule, you'll be able to use that. And then lastly, we had a couple of people just asking about getting more training or more classes. So before we wrap up, I did want to just touch on that as well. First of all, thank you all again for joining us today and attending this scheduling class with Jordan and myself. We were really excited for this particular workshop and have several more like this planned to cover different topics in the next couple of weeks. Again, if there are topics that you would like to see covered, please send those our way. We really always want to hear from you and make sure that that if there are classes you want us to have, that we're accommodating that and getting those scheduled. Chances are, if you have the question, your colleagues out there have it as well. So we'd love to hear those suggestions. If you look at the next couple of weeks, we do have several additional workshops planned and scheduled out for you guys. So be sure to visit udatechnologies.com/events. Later this week on Thursday, we'll be covering new tools and features for our Redline Takeoff product. So it's got some great new tools, including roof tools and wall measurement tools and new stamps. And so we'll go through and create a new takeoff for you guys on Thursday. We'll also have a session 1 week from today, so next Tuesday, April 7th, on how to quickly set up ConstructionSuite users to work remotely. So if any of you are currently using our desktop product, ConstructionSuite, or maybe are just using desktop versions of QuickBooks and you suddenly find yourself working remotely and really needing access to some of those desktop programs, we'll talk about our hosting services via AWS and give you guys an idea of what that looks like. We also have sessions coming up to highlight what's new in ConstructionOnline. So we'll be looking at things like new advanced change orders, the checklist feature, new markup types in estimating, and a couple of new reports that we want to share with you guys. So some really great things planned there. And then we'll be doing another class on Tuesday, April 14th to look at using TeamLink with your subcontractors, trade partners, other extended team members. So a lot of great topics coming up, and then definitely let us know if there are other classes you'd like to see offered.
Yes, please. We'd love to incorporate your ideas, things you want to learn more about. This is the best time. Seriously. Look at this time as a gift in disguise to really prep your company to dominate in the next coming quarters for 2020 and beyond. I've heard from a lot of clients out there who are really gearing up and are ready to just completely take over their markets when the work picks back up again. And if you aren't in that same mindset, you're not going to be one of them. You're not going to be one of the winners. And the thing is, if you're here, you already are a winner, so might as well take advantage of the time and let us know how we can equip you to take over your markets moving forward.